and welcome to Access Studio. My name is Nancy Gesimondo, and I'm very pleased to be visiting the studio of Loretta Lomanto here in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Loretta is a Colombian-born artist open to working with many different media, primarily digital photography and digital collage. She is also a skilled illustrator, and currently she is working with mixed media in addition to exploring video. Loretta received a BFA in Fine Art at the Universidad Nacional in her hometown of Medellín. After receiving a BA in Philosophy from the Universidad de Antioquia, Loretta moved to New York City in 2007 and obtained a master's degree in Fine Art from Parsons, the New School. Her work has been featured in group exhibitions in South America and several galleries in New York. Special installations of her work have been selected by the group Four Heads at the Governor's Island Art Fairs in 2011, 12, and 14. Loretta has also been selected to participate in exhibitions at Cloying Parlor, a Brooklyn-based alternative space run by artist and professor Diane Dwyer. Part of Loretta's ongoing practice is participating at the alternative program called New York City Crit Club, run by professors Catherine Haggerty and Hilary Doyle from Rutgers University. Her awards include a residency at Turkeyland Cove Foundation in Edgartown, Massachusetts in 2017, and the Openings Artist Summer Residency in Lake George in 2018 and 2019. Body image, gender, and the construction of identity are some of the major subjects in her work. She uses photo manipulation as a form of externalizing the displacement between body and identity. Her most recent body of work focuses on an intense exploration between the female body, sexuality, and desire. And her work addresses the limits between reality and fiction. Hi Loretta, thank you so much for having me in your studio today.
Thanks for coming.
One of the things I was most curious about is what made you know you wanted to be an artist?
I feel like I always knew. When I was growing up, I drew all the time. Both my parents are architects, so they're very creative. My closest aunt's a painter. Her partner was a writer. So yeah, I felt like it was always in me to be a creative person.
What are some of the themes that drive your work?
Feminism has always been a great theme in my work. Gender identity as well, gender relations, violence, sexuality, an erotic sense of surrealism is part of my work as well.
Describe the media that you use to comprise these images.
Well, these works that are right here have vintage wallpaper, levels of vellum with ink, and photo collage, digital photo collage. It's a variety of mixed media. Here I have different gel mediums. Over here there is two-part epoxy. These three ones are, there's even like this golden, looks like gold leaf, but it's actually a yogurt lid. So it's a variety of mixed media that I'm experimenting with over the past, I'll say, 2 to 3 years. Before I used to work mostly digitally.
Why is the body and the gender identity such a prevalent aspect of your thinking?
That's a very loaded question. I guess in a nutshell, I felt growing up that I did not really belong in my body as a woman. I grew up with a lot of feminist influence through my mom and my aunt and her partner. My aunt and her partner were part of the feminist movement in the 80s and 70s in Colombia. But I didn't feel like I was fully a woman. I felt very, very like at war with the body. So that kind of like
plays out in your work.
Yeah, that comes in my work. I have series of work right now where it's a lot of self-portrait. But before I used to work with male models, and my work, I'll say, way in the past, like the past decade, was mostly trying to understand the difference between the male body, the female body, through painting, through art history, through sculpture. And I moved into digital photography because it was a medium that became very easy to work with as you were traveling and moving. But now that I'm back to settling down, I want to go back to the collage making and the mixed media.
So you often break up the images, or like you say, photo collage them into like mirror images and almost like mandala images and abstract them in a sense. Is that to blend the mystery between male and female and to make the viewer question?
As I moved into working digitally with Photoshop, I wanted to create stories that were really not real. So yeah, now that I'm moving into mandalas, working in Photoshop, you can create like endless mandalas. You could write a script and have it make all sorts of wallpaper patterns for you, which it's amazing.
One of the things that fascinates me about your particular work, Loretta, is that you do use pattern, but it appears that it's not necessarily just for decorative purposes. Can you explain your methodology for using or incorporating pattern in your work?
Yeah, so my fascination with wallpaper as a decorative but also a very loaded object in the history of design and art. It's a very long one, but to encapsulate it, it's I love how it serves as both something that's beautiful but also something that covers. So in my work, I like the idea of different layers that are like obstructing and that you kind of like dip through them. The wallpaper has also this quality of peeling with time, of being torn off and replaced. I do want some of the beauty of it, but I also wanted to bring the power of the wallpaper as a symbol of domesticity, of home, of things that are being embellished and sometimes are covering other things that might not be as beautiful as the actual paper.
That's the impression I get, is that there are these little vignettes and then the women are in there with a completely different narrative in the story.
Yeah, that goes back to the story of Charlotte Perkins. Yellow Wallpaper is a feminist writer that's referenced by a lot of different artists, so I'm not the first person to dig into this. Yellow Wallpaper is a very, very intense short story where you see this woman that just had a baby and she's being condescended by her husband and kind of like driven into madness. But she's in this controlled feminine environment where she's supposed to get better, but she just turns even crazier. So indeed, there is so many things that we could see, like the vignettes that you said in the little wallpaper, like very controlled environment. In the story, she sees women like that are peeking towards her, and it's a very intense short story. And when I read it, I was already working with wallpaper, so it was kind of like a aha moment. Mm-hmm. And it started a lot of series of other mixed media and even videos and other work.
And then what I noticed when you look up close into some of these photo collage where you have repeats or mirror images of the bodies, they're not just patterns, they are actually comprised of bits of human bodies, which is clearer to see in the images and the larger paintings, but even in these beautiful little tile-like pieces, they're fragments of the body. So what is your impetus for using that and to manipulate the body in that way?
Well, previous work, I was already manipulating the body, and then it just occurred to me, looking at vintage wallpaper that you can buy online, it just occurred to me like I could just make my own wallpaper pattern, but not only that, I could make one that is actually made of people, which sounds really creepy, and it's my artwork has been called creepy in other times, so it goes well with that. So yes, those are body parts. In the case of these two pieces and other works, the body parts are not my own in that case, though at the beginning I was working mostly with my own body parts, just basically taking photos with a green screen and then photoshopping different areas. And at the beginning I was trying to do poses that were very symmetrical. For these guys, I actually just use, because our body is not symmetrical, I just cut them in Photoshop and make them be symmetrical. Those guys are, these two over here, are photo transfer on vellum. And I have been doing other type of photo transfers because these guys are just a photograph that's printed digitally and cut. But there is something about that like the transfer action seems very like a tattoo. Mm-hmm. It's like an imprinting. It's very time consuming. and I'm very impatient person, so it's been really hard. But yeah, it's fun. Like when I realized that if you know how to use Photoshop and you don't have to be an expert, you could just make infinite patterns really really quickly. So and the body parts. One of them is our friend Sandra from Lake George.
Yes.
Yeah, so I have now I have an infinite library of people's body parts from the first residency at Lake George at openings. Yeah.
That's so funny. And then I see they're covered in resin, is it?
So those two pieces have no resin. Those two were actually done at Lake George, and I decided not to touch them. They were kind of, I guess, like a first try, a first sketch. They have vellum, handmade paper, and underneath of acrylic and the photo transfer, and a vintage wallpaper. So what I was doing was actually covering the whole thing and then ripping off both the handmade paper and the wallpaper that's underneath, and then putting the vellum transfers on top. But there is no resin to protect them. They are only glued, which it has a lot of other technical problems. This one over here has no vellum, which takes away some of the technical problems of having air pockets and little bubbles. And I actually carved in some of the gel mediums with a little brush and then went back to apply paint. And this is mostly polyethylene and two-part epoxy. So I've been using combinations of those two mediums for kind of like make it last longer, because I'm not really sure how safe these two are for like posterity. But I mean, I feel like artists have that question all the time, like, will my work look like that in 100 years?
Right. You do so much experimenting with different materials, and I guess you just invent your own processes on some level.
I've been having a lot of fun. Some of the fun has been a little bit tragic. I have been making some creative mistakes, so some of the resin is actually moving inside when it didn't cure completely, and then I seal it. One of the works I've been calling Chernobyl, because it's still like alive and moving and dripping on other works. So it is a lot of experimentation. This is the first year that I'm in this space, so I have my studio space as opposed to working from home or from residencies, which gives me a space with no cats, no cat hair, no partner screaming at you for leaving a bunch of resin all over the place, no fumes. So it is very playful and very experimental. Some of them are still a work in progress, but I'm very happy, especially with this tree, because they have no drippage. They're very compact, and they do have all the layers that I wanted. Like there's also very light, which was a concern too.
And these are on wood panels.
Yeah, they're all on wood panels. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, but it's a different way of working than my previous work. My previous digital work was mostly I used to shoot at studio or rent studio space or find a residency, have a bunch of footage that I could process in Photoshop, and then goes to the printing. I have nothing to do with the printing process. Now that I have the studio space, I wanted to go back to kind of like my teenager years, where I used to collage everything, my notebooks, my books, and cut things and put them on top of things, and then put a layer, and then wait and come back and put a bunch of paint, or like I mentioned, a yogurt lid that looks beautiful, and put more resin on it. So that's it's been a different process for sure than other works.
I love the series, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
I mean, they're very abstract, but yet they have images that, draw you in and create a bit of mystery to them. Like you're intrigued to figure out, like, what is that? Who is that? Why is that body in that way? And I find your work is very unique for that approach.
Thanks.
In your photography work, I find it very interesting because I see that you take photographs of yourself in environments like the rooms at the residencies that you've been on, for example. And I guess you do like multiple exposures and layer those images to be some really provocative images. Can you talk about that series a bit?
Yeah, so That process started kind of like out of necessity. In the probably the first time I was selected for Governor's Island Art Fair, that time I would just be in one of the empty buildings and think, what can I do with this? Shoot a bunch of images of me interacting with different spaces, and then do one image that combine all of them. In one of the works that we were talking about, in the one that was made in Martha's Vineyard, is a similar approach where I went to a space. So that residency was a week with Turkey Land Cove Foundation, and they give you a whole house in Martha's Vineyard, a huge house, 2 floors. It's yours for doing whatever you want. I went there with my smaller photo equipment, a couple of lights, and I just explored the house. This is Martha's Vineyard, so this room had a bunch of like seashells and like fish, but the bed frame had beautiful white pointy, I guess, I don't know, structure that kind of like resembled a little bit like boobs, or I don't know, like a church. It could be so many things. So I just took all the linens, all the fish, all the decor, all the fake plants, and once all of that was done, the light from the curtain was beautiful, so I did a couple of shoots of just the room with the light, and then I did other ones of myself with, I brought different dresses that I used for different photos. I did some dressing up, some undressing, and yeah, I just played with the room, played with the space, and when all of that was done, I take them home and I process them in Photoshop and start playing kind of like a puzzle, until one image speaks to me, and that's Reverie. That's the name of the work, and I think that was made out of 4 or 5 different shots, and it just becomes one single work.
What is it about the image that you're looking for to articulate? Like, when do you say, this is really kind of interesting? You know, you mentioned like the work is a little spooky.
Yeah.
So there is a bit of a spooky, like, what just happened here?
It's definitely very tricky to know when an image is absolutely done, and I think this is something that a lot of artists, painters, and people in different mediums struggle with. I just feel like there is a moment where if it's like a puzzle, you can't fit more pieces in. It feels like it's complete to you. So I guess that's as best as I can explain. It just seems absolutely complete, and you can put another image in there.
So you've recently had a baby during the lockdown period. And during that same period, you started a series of women artists sketches that I see on Instagram. Can you tell me what drove that series?
I was just very much in need of something positive, something that could be reassuring and inspiring. So drawing every day is part of my practice, a project I started in 2016. This year, being that I was pregnant and with the pandemic, in March I started to do the drawing. Some months I will give myself a theme for the drawing, so I started to draw women, important women in feminism and art, in different areas of intellectual pursuits. And then I kept doing it because then after April and June, everything was so horrible and so many people dying, and it was something to give me hope. A lot of women they could be women from 100 years ago, that women of color, women that were poor, women that were queer, that they overcame so many things. It made me feel like we can push through this year, and I could have my baby. There was a lot of uncertainty as where could you have your baby, who could be there with you, and at least that part made it very hopeful to have this project while I was pregnant with him.
It was so impressive to see these daily sketches, and they're such beautiful, beautiful drawings. They are such loving tributes to these women. I really couldn't believe that they were done so quickly in a day. are some of your influences?
A lot of my influences in art tend to be women artists. Growing up with my aunt being a painter and her being very into the feminist movement, I'll say Frida Kahlo, Dorothea Tanin, Remedios Varo, all of those are women in surrealism movement. Yeah, in terms of photography, I love a lot of pioneers of photojournalism. Dorothea Lange is like one of the photographers I admire a lot. There's other photographers like Sally Mann that work with her own kids and black and white. Cindy Sherman is a huge influence on my artwork. I got to know her work when I was in my undergrad, and I love how she will create different stories through photography. Nan Goldin, in a very different way, it's also a great influence. Artists that work with both photography, collage, and other mediums, like Wangari Mutu. It's an artist I love too, for her collage and photo work too, and now she's working with sculpture too. More recently, I'm really much into seeing people that are of my contemporary people that are working with mixed media and resin, in part to kind of like pick up their brains and see how they're doing, it's kind of like a recipe. How are they cooking the same ideas that I'm trying to cook? And just, there's a lot of people that one can look into that works with mixed media right now.
This recent work is you're exploring video, and how do your ideas that you're already working with play out in video?
Video is a way of telling what the story I want to tell with my photographs and the layers of content that video is a tool that you can use to tell that story in a very straightforward way. So it just occurred to me, like, why don't I just, instead of just shooting photos of myself doing these activities, also shoot video, and then I could play with it. So I only have one piece that is done. It's very experimental. I showed it at a clothing parlor last year during what they call the circus, which is a one-day show of performers and videos. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm looking forward to do more experiments on that medium.
Well, that was very interesting. I really thank you so much for having me in your studio today. It was really, really interesting to learn more about your process and what drives your work, and I'm really looking forward to following your career. And I really appreciate meeting Emilio today, this little darling. So thank you so much, Loretta.
Thank you as well for coming, and a great conversation.
Thank you for tuning in to Access Studio today. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Loretta Lomanto, and that you'll tune in next time. You can check out Access Studio on YouTube, and please remember to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.